Hey guys, tonight we are forging the wedge. The sword is a precise instrument, but the axe is a tool of physics. We are joining the medieval axe maker. We are going to drift a hole through solid iron and weld steel to create a blade that can split the world. This is a story about impact, heat, and leverage. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, hear the sledgehammer fall, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The forge is already breathing when you arrive. Not the sharp, gasping breath of a man running, but the deep, slow pull of something that has been alive for centuries. The bellows rise and fall with a rhythm that feels older than memory, pushing air through the coals in waves that make the fire pulse like a heartbeat. The light it throws is not the clean yellow of a candle or the white of daylight. It is orange, deep orange, the color of a sun that is setting inside the earth itself. And in that light, everything moves. The walls seem to shift. The tools hanging from their hooks cast shadows that stretch and shrink with each breath of the forge. Even the dust in the air becomes visible, swirling in lazy spirals, each particle catching the glow for just a moment before disappearing back into darkness. The smell is immediate and total. It fills your nose, your throat, your lungs before you have even taken a conscious breath. Coal dust, thick and mineral and ancient. It smells like stone that has been crushed and burned, like the earth opened up and turned inside out. Beneath that is the smell of iron. Not rust, not the flat, dead scent of metal left in the rain, but hot iron, iron that is alive and changing. It has a sharpness to it, a brightness that cuts through the heaviness of the coal. And under everything, so faint you might not notice it at first, is the smell of sweat. Old sweat, baked into the wooden handles of hammers, soaked into the leather apron hanging by the door, ground into the packed dirt floor by years of boots and labor. The anvil stands in the center of the space like an altar. It is not large, not ornate, but it commands the room in a way that nothing else does. The top is smooth, polished to a dull shine by thousands of hours of hammering. The edges are sharp and clean, the corners still holding their geometry despite the years. But the sides, the thick, heavy sides that taper down to the base, are darker. They are stained with scale, the black flakes of oxidized iron that fall away from hot metal with every strike. Some of the scale has been pressed into the surface, creating a texture like rough skin. The base of the anvil disappears into a massive wooden stump, a section of oak so old and dense that it has turned almost black. The wood is scarred, burned in places where hot metal has touched it, split along the grain from the force of countless blows. But it holds. It has always held. The tools are arranged with a precision that speaks of habit, not decoration. Hammers of different weights hang in a row, their handles smooth and dark with use. The heads are clean, the faces flat and true. There are chisels, punches, fullers, each one forged for a specific purpose, each one shaped by the work it was made to do. The tongs are there too, long-handled and strong, their jaws shaped to grip round bars, square bars, flat stock, whatever the work requires. Everything is within reach. Everything is where it should be. This is not a workspace that tolerates inefficiency. Every motion matters. Every second counts. When the iron is hot, there is no time to search for a tool. The coal is piled in a mound beside the forge, black and angular, each piece irregular and sharp-edged. It is not charcoal, not the light, porous remains of burned wood. This is mineral coal, dense and hard, dug from deep seams in the earth. It burns hotter than wood, longer than wood, and it does not collapse into ash the way charcoal does. It holds its shape even as it burns, glowing from within, turning from black to deep red to orange to white as the heat intensifies. The fire is built in layers, coal piled around and over the iron, creating a pocket of heat that can reach temperatures no wood fire could ever achieve. The bellows force air into the base of this pile, and the coal responds, glowing brighter, hotter, until the air above it shimmers and distorts. You can hear the fire. It is not a roar, not a crackle. It is a low, steady hiss, the sound of carbon combusting, of oxygen being consumed. Occasionally, a piece of coal will split with a sharp snap, releasing a small puff of smoke. The bellows add their own sound, a rhythmic wheeze and thump as the wooden paddles compress and expand, as the leather flexes and the air is forced through the narrow pipe into the heart of the fire. And beneath it all, or perhaps above it, is the ringing, the anvil ringing. Even when no one is striking it, it seems to hold the memory of every blow it has ever received. A low, metallic hum that you feel more than hear, a vibration in the air that never quite fades. The axe maker enters the space without ceremony. He does not announce himself. He does not need to. His presence changes the room the way the opening of a door changes the pressure in the air. He is not a large man, but he is solid, built like the tools he uses, all function and no excess. His hands are scarred, the skin thick and calloused, marked with small burns that have healed into pale spots. His forearms are corded with muscle, developed not in a gymnasium, but through years of swinging hammers, of gripping tongs, of holding hot iron steady while it is shaped. He wears a leather apron, stained and burned, the surface cracked in places but still strong. Beneath it, his shirt is simple, heavy linen, dark with sweat at the chest and underarms. His face is weathered, lined not with age, but with concentration, with the narrowing of eyes against heat and light, with the tightening of the jaw that comes from precision work. He moves to the coal pile and selects pieces with a practiced eye, building up the fire, layering the fuel, creating the bed that will hold the iron. He works with a steady, unhurried rhythm. There is no wasted motion. Each piece of coal is placed with intention, building the structure of the fire the way a mason builds a wall. When he is satisfied, he works the bellows, slow pulls at first, coaxing the fire awake, then deeper, stronger, pushing the air through until the coal responds, glowing brighter, the heat rising in waves that you can feel from across the room. The iron is brought out, not a delicate piece, not a thin rod or a decorative blank. This is a block, a thick rectangular bar of soft iron, heavy and dark. It is perhaps a foot long, 3 inches wide, 2 inches thick. The surface is rough, the corners slightly rounded, the color a dark gray that is almost black. This is wrought iron, iron that has been worked before, hammered and folded and refined until most of the impurities have been driven out. It is not steel. It does not have the carbon content to harden into an edge, but it is strong. It is malleable. It can be shaped without cracking, bent without breaking. It is the body of the axe, the mass that will give the tool its weight, its leverage, its ability to transfer the force of a swing into the splitting of wood. The block is placed into the fire, nestled into the glowing coal. More coal is piled on top, burying it, surrounding it, cutting it off from the air. The bellows are worked again and the fire responds, the heat intensifying, soaking into the iron. You cannot see the metal now. It is hidden, buried in the glowing bed. But you can imagine it, absorbing the heat, the molecules inside beginning to vibrate faster, the rigid structure of cold iron beginning to loosen, to soften. This will take time. Iron is dense. It does not heat quickly, but the forge is patient, and the axe maker knows exactly how long to wait. While the iron heats, he prepares. He selects a hammer from the rack, a heavy one, the head weighing perhaps 4 pounds. The handle is ash, strong and flexible, worn smooth where his hands will grip it. He tests the weight, feeling the balance, the way the head wants to fall. He sets it on the edge of the anvil where it will be ready. He checks the tongs, making sure the jaws are clean, that they will grip the hot iron securely. He adds more coal to the fire, building up the reserve, ensuring that the heat will not drop when the iron is removed. Everything is preparation. Everything is readiness. The light from the forge is growing brighter. The coal on top of the buried iron is glowing now, shifting from red to orange. The heat is rising, a column of shimmering air above the fire. The axe maker leans in, moving aside a few pieces of coal with a poker, checking the color of the metal beneath. Not yet. It is warming, but it has not reached the temperature needed for the first work. He replaces the coal, works the bellows again, and waits. The waiting is part of the process. There is no rushing iron. It will heat at the speed it heats, and taking it out too soon means harder work, more effort, less control. The metal must be soft enough to move under the hammer, hard enough that the crystals inside have loosened their grip on each other, ready to flow, to shift, to take new shapes. The color will tell the story. Iron glows in a spectrum as it heats. First, a dull red, barely visible in daylight, the color of embers nearly dead. Then a deeper red, cherry red, the color of the fruit at its ripest. Brighter still orange, then a yellow-orange that seems to pulse with its own light. And if you push further, if you knead the iron even softer, it will glow yellow, then white, a heat so intense that it is dangerous, that can burn through itself if you are not careful. The axe maker moves the coal aside again. The iron is glowing now, a deep orange that lights up the inside of the fire. He nods, satisfied. The tongs are taken up, their jaws opened, and he reaches into the heat, gripping the block firmly near one end. The metal comes out of the fire trailing wisps of smoke, glowing bright in the relative darkness of the forge. The light it casts is intense, turning everything around it into shadow. He moves to the anvil, swings the block over, and sets it down on the flat top with a solid clang that seems to shiver through the air. The hammer is in his other hand now, raised, and it falls. The sound is enormous. Not a sharp crack, but a deep, ringing boom that fills the space and echoes off the walls. The hammer strikes the glowing iron, and the metal responds, flattening slightly under the blow, sending up a shower of orange sparks. These are not sparks like those from a fire. These are pieces of scale, the oxidized skin of the iron, blasted free by the impact. They fly in arcs, glowing bright for a moment before fading to black, falling to the floor like tiny meteorites. He strikes again, and again. Each blow is measured, controlled, the hammer falling from the same height, striking with the same force. The iron is being flattened, spread, the thickness reduced, the width increased. The block is slowly becoming a bar, longer and flatter with each strike. The ringing of the anvil continues, a low, metallic note that hangs in the air between each blow, overlapping, building into a continuous tone that you feel in your chest, in your bones. The iron is cooling as he works. The bright orange is fading, becoming a deeper red. He can feel it in the resistance of the metal, the way it pushes back against the hammer, the way it requires more force to move. He works quickly, efficiently, knowing that he has only a limited time before the heat is gone and the work must stop. A dozen blows, 2 dozen, and the block has been transformed. It is longer now, flatter, still thick enough to have weight, but beginning to take the shape of something purposeful. Back into the fire it goes. The tongs release it into the glowing bed, and coal is piled on top again. The bellows wheeze and thump, and the fire surges, reclaiming the iron, soaking it with heat once more. The axe maker steps back, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. Sweat is already beading on his skin, despite the coolness of the air outside the forge's immediate circle of heat. This is the rhythm of the work. Heat, hammer, heat, hammer. Each cycle removes a little more of the material's resistance, shapes it a little more, brings it closer to the final form. The second heating takes less time. The iron is thinner now, with more surface area, and it absorbs the heat more quickly. When it comes out again, glowing orange, the hammer work continues. The bar is being refined, the thickness made more uniform, the width controlled. Each strike is deliberate. The axe maker is not simply beating the metal into submission. He is forging it, using the hammer as a tool of precision, reading the way the iron moves, the way it spreads, adjusting the angle of each blow, the placement, the force. The metal is not dead. It is responsive, alive under the hammer, and he is in conversation with it, listening, adjusting, shaping. The bar is roughly 2 feet long now, flat, and even, the surface covered in a dark grey scale that will need to be removed later. But the form is emerging. This will be the body of the axe. One end will become the eye, the hole through which the handle will pass. The other end will become the bit, the edge that will cut. But first, the eye must be created, and that requires a technique that seems almost like magic. The slitting chisel is selected from the tools. It is a simple thing, a length of steel about 8 inches long, perhaps 3/8 of an inch thick, tapering to a flat, narrow edge. It is not sharpened like a knife. The edge is blunt, almost squared off. This tool does not cut metal. It does not remove material. It pushes metal aside, creating a space where there was none before. The chisel is cold, dark, ready. The bar of iron goes back into the fire, positioned so that the center section is buried deepest in the coals. This is where the eye will be formed, and it needs the most heat. The bellows are worked steadily, and the fire climbs higher. The axe maker watches the color, waiting for that perfect orange, that moment when the iron is soft enough to accept the chisel without cracking, hot enough that the metal will move willingly. When the bar is pulled from the fire this time, the center section is glowing brighter than the ends, almost yellow-orange, radiating heat that you can feel from several feet away. It is placed on the anvil, positioned carefully so that the glowing center is directly over the flat top. The slitting chisel is taken up in one hand, the point placed against the center of the hot iron, precisely where the eye will begin. The hammer rises and falls. Tink. The sound is different now, sharper, higher pitched than the deep ringing of hammer on iron. The chisel bites into the soft metal, and the iron yields, parting slightly, the edges rising up around the intrusion. Tink. Another blow, the chisel driven deeper. The metal is not being removed. It is being displaced, pushed to the sides, forced to make room. Tink. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic. Each strike drives the chisel a fraction deeper, the slit growing, opening, a dark line appearing in the glowing orange of the iron. The axe maker works with absolute focus. The chisel must go straight, must stay centered, must not wander to one side or the other. If the slit is not true, the eye will be deformed and the axe will be weakened. He watches the line, adjusts the angle microscopically, strikes again. Tink, tink, tink. The sound has a musical quality, a high ringing note that contrasts with the deeper tone of the anvil, the two sounds weaving together into a pattern that fills the space. Iron is cooling again. The bright orange is fading to red, and he can feel the metal becoming harder, more resistant. The chisel is still moving into the iron, but each blow requires more force, achieves less depth. He knows when to stop. Pushing too far, working the metal when it is too cool, risks cracking. The iron is returned to the fire and the process repeats. Heat, position, strike. Tink, tink, tink. The slit grows deeper with each heating cycle, the line extending through the thickness of the bar. This is slow work, patient work. The chisel must go through the entire thickness of the iron, but it must do so gradually, heating by heating, allowing the metal to move without being shocked, without being stressed beyond its capacity. On the third heating, the chisel breaks through. The axe maker can feel it, the sudden give as the point emerges from the bottom of the bar. He does not celebrate. He simply notes it, adjusts, and continues. The slit must be opened now, widened slightly, made uniform along its length. The chisel is worked back and forth, tapped through from both sides, ensuring that the opening is clean, that the edges are smooth. The sound continues, that steady tink, 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 each strike echoing in the space, overlapping with the ones before it, creating a continuous ringing that seems to have no beginning and no end. When he is satisfied, the bar is returned to the fire one more time. But now a different tool is prepared, the drift. This is the magic step, the moment that transforms a simple slit into a functional eye. The drift is a piece of steel, carefully forged and hardened, shaped like a teardrop. The narrow end is rounded, perhaps a 1/4 inch in diameter. The wide end, the teardrop's fat bottom, is perhaps 1.5 inches across. The surface is smooth, polished, designed to slide through hot iron without sticking. The drift is cold, room temperature, dark against the glowing background of the forge. The iron comes out of the fire, the slit now visible as a dark line through the orange glow of the metal. It is placed on the anvil, positioned so that the slit is horizontal, accessible from above. The narrow end of the drift is inserted into the slit, just the tip, a fraction of an inch. The hammer is raised, and it falls on the top of the drift, driving it down into the iron. The metal resists at first, the opening tight, the iron not wanting to give way. But the heat has made it soft, and the steel drift is hard, unyielding. It forces its way in, pushing the iron aside, and the slit begins to widen. Another blow. The drift sinks deeper, the narrow tip disappearing into the hot metal. The iron is expanding around it, forced to accommodate the increasing diameter of the drift. This is not cutting. This is not drilling. This is displacement on a grand scale. The drift is reshaping the iron from within, pushing the molecules aside, creating space where there was only a thin slit moments before. The hammer falls again and again, a steady rhythm, each blow driving the drift a little deeper. The sound is different from the chisel work. It is deeper, more solid, a heavy thump followed by the ringing of the anvil. The drift moves slowly, inexorably, through the thickness of the bar. The iron is glowing bright around the intrusion, the heat of friction adding to the heat already present, keeping the metal soft, compliant. Halfway through, the bar goes back into the fire. The drift is left in place, protruding from the top of the iron like a strange growth. Coal is piled around the assembly and the bellows are worked. The fire surges and the heat soaks back into the metal, resoftening it, preparing it for the next stage. When it comes out again, glowing orange, the drift still in place, the hammer work continues. Blow after blow, the drift is driven further, the wide teardrop body now entering the iron, forcing the eye to expand to its full size. The iron is transforming. What was a solid bar is now a bar with a hole through its center, a perfect oval opening, shaped by the drift, sized to accept a wooden handle. The edges of the eye are smooth, rounded by the passage of the hardened steel, compressed and work-hardened by the force of the blows. This eye will not crack. It will not split when the handle is driven through. It has been forged to strength, shaped by heat and impact into a form that will last for generations. The drift is driven completely through, emerging from the bottom of the bar. The axe maker taps it a few more times, ensuring that the eye is uniform, that the opening is clean all the way through. Then he takes up the tongs, grips the hot iron, and lifts it free of the drift, leaving the steel tool lying on the anvil, faintly warmed by its passage through the orange metal. The bar is held up to the light of the forge, and through the body of the iron, through the thick mass of soft metal, he can see the fire beyond, glowing through the eye. The hole is perfect, round, smooth, precisely where it needs to be. Back into the fire. There is more work to do. The body of the axe is formed, the eye is complete, but the bit, the cutting edge, has not yet been created. This requires a different approach, a different technique entirely. The bar is heated again, but this time the focus is on one end, the end that will become the edge. The coal is arranged to concentrate the heat there, and the bellows are worked to bring that section to a bright orange, almost yellow. When it comes out, glowing intensely at one end, the axe maker positions it on the anvil and takes up the hammer. He begins to thin the end, striking it, spreading the metal outward, flattening it. The thick, rectangular bar begins to transform, the end spreading wider, becoming a wedge. Each blow is precise, the hammer landing exactly where it needs to, controlling the flow of the metal, directing it outward, creating the broad, flat shape that will become the bit. But soft iron will not hold an edge. It can be sharpened, but the edge will fold over at the first impact, will dull after a few strokes. To create a lasting edge, a cutting edge that can withstand the force of striking wood, splitting logs, biting into timber, a different material is needed. Steel, high-carbon steel. This is iron that has been infused with carbon, hardened, capable of taking and holding a sharp edge. But steel is expensive. It is difficult to make. It is not wasted. The solution is elegant. The axe will not be made entirely of steel. Only the edge, the bit, the part that actually does the cutting, will be steel. The rest of the axe, the body, the eye, the mass, will remain soft iron. And the two will be joined, welded together in the fire, forged into a single piece that combines the best qualities of both materials. The wedge of steel is prepared. It is a small piece, perhaps 3 inches long, an inch wide, tapering to a blunt edge. It has been forged separately, folded and hammered to refine the grain, to ensure that the carbon is evenly distributed. The surface is rough, dark, covered in scale. But beneath that scale is steel, hard and ready. The bit end of the iron bar is heated again, brought to a bright orange. Then it is placed on the anvil, and with a heavy chisel and the hammer, the axe maker begins to split it, not cutting through, but creating a gap, a mouth at the end of the bar. The chisel is driven in, the iron parts opening up like jaws. The gap is widened, hammered flat on the inside surfaces, creating a pocket, a space into which the steel wedge will fit. The steel is cleaned. A wire brush is taken up, and the scale is scrubbed away, revealing the lighter, brighter metal beneath. This is critical. Scale will prevent the weld. The surfaces must be clean, bare metal to bare metal, for the forge weld to take. The iron is cleaned as well, the inside surfaces of the split end brushed until they shine dully in the firelight. Both pieces go into the fire together now, the iron with its split end and the steel wedge. They are positioned side by side, buried in the coal. But now something is added. A fine powder is sprinkled over the clean surfaces. Borax, flux. When heated, it will melt, forming a glass that protects the clean metal from oxidation, that helps the surfaces flow together, that promotes the weld. The bellows are worked hard, and the fire climbs to its highest heat. The iron and steel must reach welding temperature, a heat higher than forging temperature, hot enough that the surfaces become almost liquid, ready to fuse. The color is the guide. Orange is not enough. Yellow is not quite there. The metal must reach a bright yellow, almost white, a heat that makes the air above it shimmer and distort, a heat that is at the very edge of burning. The axe maker watches, his face close to the fire, eyes narrowed against the intensity. The borax melts, flowing over the metal, bubbling slightly, protecting the surfaces. The iron reaches temperature first, glowing bright. The steel, denser, harder, takes longer. But eventually, it too reaches that critical heat, glowing with the same intense yellow-white. Now, there is no time to waste. The tongs grip the iron bar, pulling it from the fire. The steel wedge is positioned quickly, inserted into the split end, the cleaned surfaces brought together. The assembly is swung to the anvil, positioned, and the hammer falls. Hard. The blow is enormous, the full force of the axe maker's arm and shoulder behind it, the hammer striking the joint where iron and steel meet. The metal is soft, almost plastic at this temperature, and the blow compresses it, squeezes the surfaces together, forces the molecules to intermingle. Another blow, equally hard, and another. The scale on the outside of the joint explodes away in a shower of sparks, blasted free by the violence of the impacts. The ringing of the anvil is deafening now, each blow creating a wave of sound that crashes through the space. The metal is welding, the iron and steel fusing, becoming one. The axe maker works with furious speed, knowing that the heat is dropping with every second, that the window for welding is narrow. He strikes the joint from multiple angles, ensuring that the entire seam is compressed, that there are no gaps, no cold spots. The jaws of the split iron close around the steel wedge, gripping it, melding with it, incorporating it into the structure of the axe. 30 seconds, maybe 40. That is all the time there is. Then the glow begins to fade, dropping from yellow to orange, and the welding is done. The assembly goes back into the fire immediately, not to weld again, but to even out the temperature, to soak the entire piece with heat so that it can be shaped, so that the bit can be drawn out, thinned, refined. When it comes out again, the end of the axe is changed. The steel is now part of the iron, visible as a slightly different texture, a slightly different color in the glowing metal, but continuous, seamless. The hammer work continues, but now it is gentler, more controlled. The bit is being shaped, the wedge of steel thinned and spread, creating the broad, flat edge that will be sharpened. The iron behind it provides mass, weight, support. The steel at the very front provides hardness, the ability to cut. The blows continue, steady and rhythmic, each one moving metal, refining shape, bringing the form closer to its final state. The bit spreads wider, becoming a fan shape, the edge a long, straight line across the front of the axe. The transition from iron to steel is invisible now, hidden within the structure, the two materials working together as one. Heat and hammer, heat and hammer. The cycles continue, each one bringing more refinement, more precision. The body of the axe is shaped, the thickness adjusted, the curves refined. The pole, the back end opposite the bit, is squared off, creating a flat surface that can be used as a hammer if needed. The entire piece is brought to an even temperature, heated and forged and heated again, ensuring that the grain structure is refined, that the metal is dense and strong throughout. Hours pass. The light outside the forge changes, dims, fades. But inside, the fire continues to glow, the bellows continue to wheeze, the hammer continues to fall. The axe maker does not rush. Each heating is an opportunity to improve the form, to correct a slight irregularity, to refine a curve. He works with the patience of someone who knows that quality cannot be hurried, that the iron will tell him when it is ready, that the form will emerge when the time is right. The axe is taking shape. It is recognizable now, no longer just a bar of iron with a hole and a bit, but an object with purpose, with character. The eye is perfect, round and smooth, positioned precisely to balance the weight of the bit. The body curves gently, thick enough to provide mass, but not so thick that the axe becomes unwieldy. The bit spreads wide, the steel edge a bright line across the front, ready to be sharpened. The pole is flat and true, a secondary striking surface. The final shaping is done cold. The metal has been worked enough, heated enough. Now it needs to cool, to settle, to allow the grain structure to stabilize. The axe is set aside on the bench, still warm but no longer glowing, and the fire is allowed to die down slightly. The bellows rest. The hammer is returned to its place. The forge breathes more slowly now, the urgency gone, the intense work complete. But the axe is not finished. It has been forged, yes. The basic form is complete. The eye is drifted, the bit is welded. But the surface is rough, covered in scale, pitted and irregular. The edge exists, but it is blunt, a thick line of steel that will not cut. There is grinding to be done, shaping with files and stones, the slow removal of material to create the final geometry. There is hardening to be done, heating the steel bit to critical temperature and quenching it in water or oil, transforming the structure from soft to hard, from forgeable to unbreakable. There is tempering to be done, carefully reheating the hardened steel to reduce its brittleness, to give it toughness, to create the balance between hardness and resilience that makes a good edge. The axe maker looks at the rough form resting on the bench. He can see what it will become. He can see the finished tool, the polished surface, the sharp edge, the smooth curves. But that is the work of tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. Tonight the forging is done. The iron has been drifted. The steel has been welded. The body has been shaped. The heavy work, the work of heat and impact and force, is complete. The forge fire settles into glowing coals, the orange fading to deep red, the heat ebbing. The tools are cleaned and returned to their places. The anvil, silent now, still holds the memory of every blow in its ringing mass. The floor is littered with scale, black flakes that crunch underfoot, the shed skin of transforming metal. The smell of coal dust and hot iron lingers in the air, thick and permanent, the smell of work, of creation, of matter forced into new forms by will and skill and fire. Outside, the world continues in darkness. But here, in this small space, something new has come into being. A tool, an axe. Not yet finished, not yet sharp, but alive with potential. The iron and steel have been joined, forged together into a form that did not exist before. And tomorrow, the work will continue. The grinding, the shaping, the hardening, the transformation from rough forging to finished tool. But that is another stage, another set of skills, another conversation between maker and material. For now, there is only the quiet settling of the fire, the cooling of the metal, the slow return of the forge to stillness. The wedge has been forged. The hole has been drifted through solid iron. The steel has been welded to create a blade that will split the world. And the work, patient and precise, continues in the heat and the dark and the ringing of the anvil, in the space where metal becomes tool, where force becomes form, where the medieval axe maker shapes the world one hammer blow at a time. The morning comes cold and grey, the kind of morning where the air itself seems heavy, weighted with moisture that has not yet decided whether to become rain or fog. The forge is dark when you enter, the coals from yesterday reduced to a fine ash, white and powdery, holding no warmth. But the anvil is there, solid and patient, and on the bench, the rough axe head waits, its surface dark and scaled, the eye a perfect oval shadow, the bit a thick wedge of potential. The fire must be rebuilt. This is ritual, the daily resurrection of heat from nothing. The old ash is raked out, carried away in a bucket, the forge bed swept clean. Fresh coal is brought in, the angular black pieces piled carefully, layer upon layer, building a nest in the center of the forge. Kindling is placed at the heart of it, small splits of dry wood, and over that a handful of charcoal, lighter and more easily ignited than the dense mineral coal. A spark is struck, steel against flint, and the shower of orange falls onto a bed of char cloth, ancient linen burned to carbon, waiting to receive the spark and nurse it into an ember. The ember glows red and alive, and it is transferred to the kindling, breath coaxed across it gently, feeding it oxygen, encouraging it to grow. Smoke rises first, thin and grey, then a small flame, yellow and uncertain. More breath, more kindling, and the flame takes hold, spreading through the dry wood, consuming it, releasing heat. The charcoal catches next, glowing red, and then the coal itself begins to respond, the surface pieces heating, starting to burn. The bellows are brought into play, slow pumps at first, then deeper, stronger, and the fire builds, climbing through the fuel, transforming black coal into glowing red heat. The forge comes alive again, breathing, pulsing, ready for the work. The axe head is examined in the growing light. The weld between the iron body and the steel bit is solid, the joint invisible except for the faintest line where the two metals meet. But this is not the final form of the edge. What exists now is a thick wedge, the steel spread across the front of the iron body, creating the basic shape of a bit. But an axe is not a simple wedge. An axe is a sophisticated tool, and the bit must be refined, shaped, layered with additional steel if the edge is to be strong enough, hard enough, to withstand years of use. More steel is needed. Two more pieces, thin wedges, smaller than the first but equally important. These will be forge welded to either side of the bit, creating a sandwich, a layered structure where the steel cutting edge is supported on both sides by the soft iron body. This is the traditional construction, the method that combines economy with performance. Steel only where it is needed, iron everywhere else. The surfaces must be prepared. The axe head is clamped in a vise, held steady, and a file is taken up. This is not the fine, smooth file used for finishing work. This is a coarse file, the teeth deep and aggressive, designed to remove material quickly. The axe maker draws it across the sides of the bit, cutting through the scale, removing the rough, oxidized surface, exposing the metal beneath. The file makes a harsh, scraping sound, a rhythmic rasp as it moves back and forth. Steel filings fall away, curling and bright, accumulating at the base of the vise. The work is methodical, covering every inch of the surfaces that will be welded, ensuring that clean metal is exposed, that there is no barrier between the materials. The two new steel wedges are prepared the same way. Each piece is filed, the scale removed, the surfaces made clean and flat. The edges are chamfered slightly, angled, to help them seat properly against the axe head. When the filing is done, the pieces are wiped clean, removing any oil or residue, any contamination that might prevent the weld. The metal gleams dully in the light, a matte silver gray ready. The flux is prepared. Borax, a white crystalline powder, is placed in a small clay dish. A few drops of water are added, just enough to turn the powder into a thick paste. This paste will be the key to the weld. When heated, borax melts into a glass, a liquid coating that flows over the hot metal, protecting it from oxygen, preventing oxidation, allowing the clean surfaces to come together and fuse. Without flux, the weld would fail, the surfaces forming a layer of scale that keeps them separate, that creates a weak joint that will crack under stress. The fire is built up, the coal piled high, the bellows worked until the heart of the forge glows white. This is welding heat, the highest temperature the forge can produce, the heat at which steel becomes almost liquid, ready to fuse with itself. The axe head is placed into the fire, positioned so that the bit is buried deepest in the coals. The two steel wedges are placed beside it, nestled into the heat. And now, time is taken to ensure the fire is perfect. The coal is adjusted, creating a pocket of intense heat, a cavity where the metal will be surrounded on all sides by glowing fuel. The bellows are worked steadily, not too fast, not too slow, maintaining a consistent blast of air that keeps the combustion running at its peak. The metal heats slowly at first. The dark surface begins to glow, a dull red that brightens gradually to cherry red, then to orange. The axe maker watches, his face close to the fire, eyes protected by squinting, by long practice of knowing where to look and where not to look. The color continues to climb. Orange becomes yellow-orange, a bright, intense glow that lights up the interior of the forge. The steel wedges are keeping pace, their smaller mass heating more quickly, glowing alongside the bit. When the color reaches bright yellow, almost painful to look at directly, the flux is applied. Using a long steel rod, the axe maker reaches into the fire and pulls the axe head partially out of the coals, just enough to expose the bit. The borax paste is spooned onto the hot metal, and it reacts immediately, bubbling, hissing, melting, and spreading across the surface. The liquid glass flows into every crevice, coating the filed surfaces, creating a protective layer. The axe head is returned to the fire, buried again, and the flux on the steel wedges is applied the same way. The pieces are pushed back into the coals, and the bellows are worked harder, driving the heat higher. The waiting is agonizing. The metal must reach welding temperature, but that temperature is a narrow window. Too cool and the surfaces will not fuse. Too hot and the steel will begin to burn, the carbon oxidizing away, the metal becoming weak and useless. The color is the only guide. Yellow is close. Bright yellow is very close. And when the yellow takes on a hint of white, when the metal seems to glow with an inner light, when the air above it shimmers and distorts so violently that you can barely see the piece itself, that is the moment. The axe maker sees it. The bit has reached that critical heat, glowing white-yellow, the flux bubbling and flowing over it like water. The tongs are ready, gripped in his left hand, and he reaches into the fire, closing the jaws around the axe head, pulling it free in one smooth motion. The light it emits is blinding, a small sun pulled from the earth. He swings it to the anvil, sets it down with the bit facing up, horizontal, ready to receive the steel. The first wedge is pulled from the fire with a second set of tongs, gripped in his right hand. It too is glowing white-yellow, almost too bright to look at. He positions it against the side of the bit, the filed surface meeting the filed surface of the axe head, the flux on both pieces flowing together, merging. The hammer is dropped, the tongs released, and both hands go to a heavier hammer, a sledge weighing 8 pounds, designed for maximum impact. The hammer rises and falls. The blow is enormous. a crash of metal on metal that sends a shockwave through the anvil, through the floor, through the air itself. The steel wedge is driven against the bit, compressed, the surfaces squeezed together with thousands of pounds of force per square inch. Sparks explode from the joint, not the lazy orange sparks of scale, but bright white sparks, pieces of flux and burning steel blasted away by the violence of the impact. The anvil rings with a deep, sustained tone, a note that hangs in the air like the tolling of a bell. Another blow. The hammer falls again, striking a different part of the joint, ensuring that the entire surface is compressed. More sparks, more ringing. The metal is fusing, the atoms at the interface mingling, the boundary between the two pieces disappearing. The heat is dropping rapidly, the bright yellow fading to orange, and the axe maker works with furious speed, knowing that he has only seconds. 3 blows, 4, 5, each one striking a different section of the joint, each one squeezing the metal, forging the weld. The glow drops to deep orange, then to red, and the welding window closes. But the joint is made. The steel wedge is now part of the axe, fused along one side of the bit, adding thickness, adding mass, adding carbon-rich steel to the cutting edge. The axe head is plunged into the fire again, repositioned, the other side of the bit exposed. The second steel wedge is waiting, already at welding heat, glowing white-yellow. The process repeats. Position, strike, sparks, ringing. The hammer falls again and again, each blow a deliberate application of force, each one compressing metal, creating bonds, forging unity from separate pieces. When both wedges are welded, the axe head is returned to the fire one more time. But now the heat is more gentle, the goal not to weld, but to even out the temperature, to allow the entire assembly to soak at a forging heat. The bit is now 3 layers thick, iron in the center, steel on both sides, a composite structure that combines the best qualities of both metals. The steel will harden, will hold an edge. The iron will absorb shock, will prevent the edge from being brittle, from shattering on impact. The hammer work continues, but now it is shaping, not welding. The bit is drawn out, thinned, spread. Each blow moves metal, stretching the layered steel and iron, creating the broad, flat shape of an axe blade. The axe maker works from the center outward, thinning the middle, preserving thickness at the edges, creating the geometry that will give the edge strength. The metal glows and fades and glows again as it cycles through the fire, each heeding an opportunity to refine, to adjust, to perfect. The beard is formed now, the extension of the blade that curves downward, protecting the hand that grips the haft, creating a hook that can catch and pull, that can be used to control an opponent's shield in combat, that adds versatility to the tool. The bottom edge of the bit is heated, brought to a bright orange, and then hammered, drawn out, pulled downward and forward. The metal stretches, the edge extending, curving, creating a graceful sweep that transitions from the main blade to the lower point. This requires delicate work, careful control of the hammer, an understanding of how the metal wants to move, where it will resist, where it will flow. Each blow is placed precisely, the hammer striking at an angle, directing the metal downward, encouraging the curve. The beard grows, extending inch by inch, the shape emerging from the mass of glowing iron and steel. The axe maker checks the symmetry constantly, eyeing the piece from different angles, comparing one side to the other, ensuring that the curves match, that the extension is balanced. Any asymmetry will throw off the balance of the finished axe, will make it awkward to swing, less effective in use. Hours pass in this shaping work. The beard is refined, thinned at the point, thickened where it joins the main blade to provide strength. The transition is smoothed, filed, hammered until there is no hard line, no weak point, just a continuous flow of metal from bit to beard, strong and graceful. The edge is roughed in, the thick steel thinned to a rough approximation of sharpness, a blunt line that will be refined later on the grinding wheel. When the forging is finally complete, when no more heat and hammer can improve the form, the axe head is set aside to cool. It sits on the bench, no longer glowing, the surface dark and scaled, steam rising from it as moisture in the air condenses on the hot metal. The fire is allowed to die down, the coal consumed, the bellows resting. The heavy work is done. What remains is finishing, the slower, more precise work of grinding and shaping and hardening. The grinding wheel is a massive disc of yellow sandstone, perhaps 3 feet in diameter, 6 inches thick. It is mounted on a wooden frame, a heavy axle running through its center, extending out on one side to a crank handle. The stone is coarse-grained, the surface rough and abrasive, capable of removing metal quickly but leaving a finish that is textured, not polished. This is not a wheel for creating mirror surfaces. This is a wheel for shaping edges, for removing scale, for grinding away excess material and revealing the form beneath. The wheel is filled with water, set in a wooden trough so that the bottom edge runs through a shallow bath. As the wheel turns, it picks up water, carrying it to the top, where it flows over the stone, cooling it, washing away the metal particles, preventing the buildup of heat that would damage the temper of the steel. The axe maker takes his position at the wheel, one hand on the crank, the other holding the axe head by the eye, gripping it firmly. The wheel begins to turn, slowly at first, the stone heavy, resistant, requiring effort to overcome its inertia. But once it is moving, momentum takes over, and the turning becomes smoother, steadier. The axe head is brought to the wheel, the edge of the bit touched to the rotating stone. The contact makes a sound, a grinding, scraping sound, harsh and continuous, the sound of stone cutting steel, of material being abraded away. Water sprays from the point of contact, a fine mist that dampens the axe maker's shirt, his hands, his face. The scale comes off first, the black oxide layer ground away to reveal the lighter metal beneath. The stone cuts through it easily, removing the rough surface, exposing the iron and steel. The axe maker works methodically, maintaining the angle, keeping the bit pressed firmly against the wheel, moving it back and forth to ensure even grinding. The shape of the edge begins to emerge, the thick, rough line becoming thinner, more defined. But an axe edge is not like a knife edge. A knife is thin, delicate, designed for slicing. An axe is brutal, designed for impact, for splitting, for driving through resistance. The edge geometry must reflect this. It must be strong, thick enough to resist chipping, shaped to push wood apart rather than slice through it. The cross-section is convex, rounded, like the profile of an apple seed. This shape concentrates force at the edge, while maintaining mass behind it, preventing the edge from folding or breaking under the stress of repeated impacts. Creating this geometry requires skill. The axe head must be held at the correct angle, rotated slowly as it moves across the wheel, presenting different parts of the edge to the stone in sequence, building up the curve. The axe maker can feel it in his hands, the way the metal meets the stone, the resistance, the vibration. He adjusts constantly, tilting the axe head slightly, shifting the angle, checking the profile by eye and by touch. His fingers trace the edge between passes, feeling for flat spots, for irregularities, for deviations from the smooth, continuous curve he is trying to create. The grinding is slow. The stone removes metal, but not quickly. Each pass takes away a thin layer, a fraction of a millimeter. But pass after pass, minute after minute, the edge takes shape. The thick, blunt steel becomes thinner, sharper, the curve becoming more pronounced, more refined. The water continues to flow, cooling the metal, washing away the steel particles that would otherwise clog the stone, preventing it from cutting. The beard requires special attention. Its curve is complex, the edge wrapping around from the main bit, following the sweep downward, the geometry changing as it goes. The axe maker works carefully here, grinding the convex profile into the beard's edge, matching it to the main blade, ensuring that the transition is smooth, that there is no weak point where the two meet. The point of the beard is thinned, sharpened, made functional as both a hook and a piercing tool. Hours pass at the wheel. The crank turns, the stone rotates, the water flows. The grinding sound becomes a background, a constant presence, the rhythm of the work. The axe head slowly transforms, the rough forging becoming a shaped tool, the edges defined, the surfaces smoothed. The scale is entirely gone now, removed by the abrasive action of the stone, revealing the metal beneath in all its subtle variations. The iron is lighter, a silvery grey. The steel is slightly darker, a finer grain, visible as distinct bands along the edge where the layers were welded together. When the edges are shaped, when the convex geometry is established along the entire length of the bit and the beard, the axe maker moves to finer work. A smaller stone, mounted on a bench, is used to refine the surfaces, to remove the coarse scratches left by the grinding wheel, to smooth the transitions. This is done dry, without water, the stone held in one hand while the other moves the axe head against it, feeling for high spots, for rough patches, for any imperfection that remains. The edge is still not sharp. It is shaped, yes, ground to the correct geometry, but the very edge itself is still somewhat blunt, a thick line of steel that would not cut effectively. But it is close. The form is there. What remains is the hardening, the heat treatment that will transform the soft, forgeable steel into hard, unbreakable steel, capable of taking and holding a true edge. The fire is rebuilt, the coals piled high, the heat brought up to a precise temperature. This is critical work. The steel must be heated to critical temperature, the point at which the crystalline structure transforms, becomes ready to be locked into a hard state. Too hot, and the grain structure becomes coarse, the steel brittle. Too cool, and the transformation does not occur, the quench producing no hardness. The color must be exact. Cherry red, a specific shade of red-orange that is darker than forging heat, but bright enough to glow visibly in dim light. The bit is placed into the fire, positioned carefully so that the steel edge is heated evenly. The axe maker watches, his eyes trained by years of experience to see the subtleties of color, to distinguish between shades that would appear identical to an untrained observer. The metal heats slowly, the color climbing from black to dull red to brighter red. He reaches in with a poker, moving the coals, adjusting the coverage, ensuring that the entire edge reaches temperature at the same time. When the color is right, the axe head is pulled from the fire and brought to the quench. This is a trough of oil, old, thick oil, dark and viscous, heated slightly to reduce its viscosity. Water would quench faster, would produce more hardness, but it would also create more stress, more risk of cracking. Oil is gentler, slower, producing a hardness that is sufficient for an axe while reducing the chance of disaster. The edge is plunged into the oil, bit first, the glowing steel disappearing into the dark liquid. The oil reacts violently, erupting into flames, a fireball that roars up from the trough, consuming the vapors, burning bright and hot. The axe maker holds the piece steady, keeping it submerged despite the flames licking around his hands, protected by thick leather gloves and by experience, by knowing how close he can get to the fire without being burned. The flames die down after a few seconds, the oil settling, and he moves the axe head through the liquid, swirling it, ensuring that the quench is even, that no part of the edge cools too slowly. The steel is transforming, the crystal structure locking into a hard, martensitic form, the carbon atoms trapped in a matrix that resists deformation, that will hold an edge against the stresses of cutting. After 30 seconds, the axe head is withdrawn from the oil. It is no longer glowing, cooled by the quench to a temperature below red heat, dark and slick with oil. The axe maker wipes it clean with a rag and examines it closely, looking for cracks, for any sign that the quench was too violent, that the steel was stressed beyond its limits. The surface is clean, unmarred. The quench was successful. But the steel is now too hard, too brittle. Hardness and toughness are not the same thing. A material can be hard but brittle, capable of holding an edge but prone to shattering under impact. What is needed is a balance, a reduction of the extreme hardness created by the quench, a tempering that will introduce some flexibility, some resilience, while retaining most of the edge-holding ability. The steel is cleaned thoroughly, the oil removed with a cloth and some fine sand, the surface polished until the metal shows bright and clean. This is necessary so that the tempering colors can be seen. As steel is reheated after quenching, oxides form on the surface, creating a spectrum of colors that indicate the temperature of the metal. These colors are the guide for tempering: pale yellow, straw yellow, bronze, purple, blue. Each color corresponds to a specific temperature, a specific reduction in hardness, a specific balance between edge holding and toughness. A small fire is built, just a handful of coals, enough to provide gentle heat. The bit of the axe is held above it, close but not touching, the heat soaking in slowly, evenly. The polished steel begins to change color. First, it takes on a faint yellow tint, a pale straw color that spreads across the surface. The axe maker watches closely, rotating the piece, ensuring that the heat is even. The yellow deepens slightly, becoming richer, and then shifts toward bronze. This is the target for an axe, a tempering that reduces the brittleness while retaining sufficient hardness for the edge. When the bronze color is even across the entire bit, the axe is removed from the heat and allowed to cool in still air. The hardening and tempering are complete. The steel is now in its final state, hard enough to hold an edge, tough enough to resist chipping, balanced between extremes. The edge can now be brought to sharpness, the final grinding done with fine stones, creating a true cutting edge that will bite into wood, that will split logs and fell trees. The haft is waiting. It was cut days ago, selected from a stack of seasoned ash wood, chosen for its straight grain, its lack of knots, its perfect length and thickness. Ash is the traditional wood for axe handles, prized for its strength, its flexibility, its ability to absorb shock without splitting. The piece is roughly shaped, octagonal in cross-section, about 30 inches long, thick at one end where it will pass through the eye of the axe head, thinner at the other end where it will be gripped. The shaping is done with a spoke shave, a small hand tool with a curved blade set between two handles. The axe maker sits on a bench, the haft clamped vertically in a vise, and draws the spoke shave down the length, shaving away thin curls of wood. The blade is sharp, the angle correct, and it cuts smoothly, removing material in long, continuous ribbons. The wood smells clean and slightly sweet, the scent of ash, of living fiber turned to tool. The shaping is a slow, meditative process. Each pass of the spoke shave removes a small amount, the octagonal shape gradually becoming round, the transitions smoothed, the diameter reduced where needed. The axe maker works by feel as much as by measurement, his hands knowing the correct shape, the way the haft should taper, the way it should feel when gripped. The thick end is shaped carefully, fitted to the eye of the axe head, tapered slightly so that it will enter the hole from the bottom, pass through, and then be locked in place by a wedge driven from the top. The fitting is precise work. The haft is tried in the eye, pushed up from below, checking the fit. Too loose, and the axe head will wobble, will be dangerous. Too tight, and the haft will not seat properly, will crack under stress. The spoke shave removes a little more wood. The haft is tried again, adjusted, tried again. The process repeats until the fit is perfect, the haft sliding through the eye with moderate resistance, seating firmly, the top emerging just far enough to allow a wedge to be driven. The wedge is cut from a piece of oak, harder than the ash, capable of spreading the top of the haft without being compressed itself. It is roughly triangular, thick at the base, tapering to a thin edge, about 4 inches long. A slot is cut into the top of the haft, a narrow kerf sawn straight down the center, about 2 inches deep. This slot will receive the wedge, and when the wedge is driven in, it will force the wood of the haft to expand, to press outward against the walls of the eye, locking the axe head in place permanently. The axe head is driven onto the haft. The thick end of the handle is inserted into the eye from below, and the entire assembly is turned upside down, the butt of the haft placed on a solid block of wood. A heavy mallet is taken up, and the axe maker strikes the pole of the axe head, driving it down onto the haft, forcing the wood through the eye. The fit is tight, the wood compressing slightly as it passes through the hole, and several blows are needed to seat the head fully, to bring it down until the shoulder of the haft, the point where the taper begins, meets the bottom of the eye. The wedge is positioned in the slot, the thin edge inserted, the thick base resting against the top of the haft. The mallet strikes, and the wedge begins to sink into the wood, forcing the slot open, spreading the fibers of the ash. Another blow, and the wedge goes deeper, the expansion increasing. The wood is being compressed against the walls of the eye, the pressure building, creating a mechanical lock that will hold even under the most violent use. The wedge is driven until it can go no further, the base flush with the top of the haft, the wood compressed and expanded and locked. The excess wood is trimmed, the top of the haft cut flush, the rough edges smoothed. The wedge is planed level, the transition from wedge to haft made smooth and continuous. The axe is now complete, the head firmly attached to the haft, the assembly strong and unified. Oil is applied, a thin coat of linseed oil, worked into the wood with a cloth, soaking into the grain, protecting it from moisture, from rot, from the stresses of weather and use. The oil darkens the ash slightly, bringing out the grain, the long, straight lines that run the length of the haft, the subtle variations in color and texture. The wood takes on a soft luster, a sheen that speaks of care, of preservation. The edge is brought to final sharpness. A fine stone, held in the hand, is drawn along the edge, refining it, removing the last traces of roughness, creating a clean, sharp line of steel. The convex geometry is maintained, the appleseed profile preserved, but now the very edge itself is keen, capable of biting into wood, of severing fibers, of cutting. The axe is tested. A log is placed upright on a chopping block, and the axe maker grips the haft with both hands, feeling the weight, the balance, the way the tool sits in his grip. He raises the axe, the head describing an arc through the air, and brings it down onto the log. The edge bites deep, sinking into the wood with a solid thunk, the impact traveling up the haft, absorbed by the ash, by the grip of his hands. The log splits, the two halves falling away, the cut clean and straight. The edge is unmarked, the steel holding, performing exactly as it was designed to do. He splits several more logs, testing the axe, feeling for any flaw, any imbalance, any weakness in the assembly. The tool performs perfectly. The head stays tight on the haft. The edge remains sharp. The balance is true, the swing natural, the weight distributed correctly for efficient cutting. The work of weeks, of careful selection and forging and shaping and fitting, has resulted in a tool that functions as it should, that is worthy of the labor invested in its creation. The axe is set aside, placed on the bench in the workshop. The fire in the forge has died completely now, the coals cold, the bellows silent. The light outside is fading, the grey day turning to darker grey, the approach of evening. The anvil stands quiet, its ringing voice stilled, holding the memory of thousands of blows, of the shaping of iron and steel, of the creation of tools. The workshop is settling into stillness. The sounds of the day, the ringing of metal, the grinding of stone, the splitting of wood are fading into memory, leaving only silence. The smell of coal dust and hot iron is still present, but it is softer now, mixed with the scent of wood and oil, the smells of completion, of work finished. The axe maker stands for a moment, looking at the completed tool. It is not ornate. There is no decoration, no engraving, no embellishment. It is pure function, every line, every curve, every dimension determined by the demands of use. The head is dark, the steel and iron showing their natural colors, patinated slightly by the heat and the quench. The haft is smooth and clean, the grain of the ash running straight and true. The edge catches the dim light, a line of brightness along the bit, and the beard, sharp and ready. He picks it up one more time, feeling the weight in his hands. It is heavy, perhaps 3 pounds, the mass concentrated in the head, the haft providing leverage, extending the reach, allowing the weight to be swung with force. This is a tool that understands physics, that uses mass and velocity and leverage to accomplish work that would be impossible by hand alone. The wedge shape of the bit will split wood, forcing the fibers apart, the convex edge preventing binding, the steel maintaining its sharpness through repeated impacts. The axe is oiled one final time, a light coat over the head, protecting the steel from rust, preserving the tool against the corrosive effects of moisture and air. The oil is worked into every surface, into the crevices where the beard meets the bit, around the eye where the haft passes through, over the pole. The metal takes on a slight sheen, the oil sealing the surface, creating a barrier. The workshop is nearly dark now. The last of the daylight has faded from the small window, and the interior is filled with shadows. The tools hang on their hooks, dark shapes against darker walls. The anvil is a solid mass, barely visible, its presence felt more than seen. The forge is cold and silent, the bed of ash pale in the darkness. The axe maker hangs the axe on the wall, a simple wooden peg driven into a beam, the haft resting against it, the head hanging down, the edge turned away for safety. It will wait there ready until it is needed. The work is complete. The iron was heated and shaped. The eye was drifted through solid metal. The steel was welded and ground and hardened. The haft was fitted and wedged. The edge was sharpened. And now the tool exists, a concentration of skill and knowledge and labor ready to serve for decades, for generations. Outside, the world is settling into night. The cold air is still, the moisture condensing into dew, settling on every surface. The workshop is a small island of warmth, the residual heat from the day's work still radiating from the walls, from the anvil, from the forge. But it is cooling, slowly returning to the temperature of the surrounding night. The axe maker leaves the workshop, pulling the door closed behind him, the latch dropping into place with a soft click. The interior is left to darkness and silence, the tools resting, the anvil waiting, the forge cold. The axe hangs on its peg, heavy and solid, the wood and metal and steel joined into a single purpose, a tool that can split the world. You can imagine it there in the darkness, the weight of it, the balance, the clean, sharp edge that was ground into the steel, the convex geometry that will resist chipping, that will drive through wood with each swing, the eye that was drifted through solid iron, the hole that seemed impossible, created by heat and force and the slow, patient driving of the teardrop drift, the weld that joined iron to steel, 3 layers forged into one, sparks flying, the anvil ringing with each massive blow. The workshop is silent now, the fire is dead, the coal is ash, the tools are still. The anvil holds its ringing in reserve, waiting for the next hammer fall, the next piece of iron to be shaped. The floor is covered in scale, the black flakes crunching underfoot, the shed skin of metal transformed by heat and force into new shapes, new purposes. This is where tools are born, in fire and impact and the slow, deliberate application of skill. In the understanding of how metal behaves, how it moves when hot, how it hardens when quenched, how it holds an edge when tempered. In the knowledge of wood, of grain and strength and flex. In the marriage of materials, each chosen for its properties, each contributing to the whole. The axe will leave the workshop eventually. It will be carried out into the world, will be used to fell trees, to split logs, to shape timber. It will feel the impact of wood, the resistance of fiber, the grain that yields or fights depending on the angle of the cut. The edge will bite and hold and release, over and over, the steel performing the task it was hardened to do. The haft will absorb the shock, will protect the hands, will provide the leverage that makes the work possible. But for now it hangs in the darkness, quiet and still. The work is done. The forging, the welding, the drifting, the grinding, the hafting, all the steps, all the heat cycles, all the hammer blows, all the careful attention to detail, to geometry, to material, to purpose. The result is a tool, simple in concept, sophisticated in execution, heavy in the hand, sharp at the edge, ready for the work it was made to do. The fire dies down to nothing. The last ember fades. The coal ash grows cold. The workshop is dark and still and silent. Outside, the night deepens. Stars appear in gaps between clouds. The world turns, and you are safe. The work is complete. The axe is made. The iron was drifted. The steel was welded. The edge was ground. The world can be split, but not tonight. Tonight there is only rest, only darkness, only the slow, deep breathing of sleep. The workshop is quiet. The tools are still. The anvil waits. And you drift down, down, into the darkness, into the quiet, into the heavy, deep sleep where the ringing finally fades, where the fire goes out, where everything is still and safe and done.